Welcome back to the coverage, live coverage of the Lost Boys Lorcana Invitational, brought to you by TCGPlayer.com. I'm Tandy, joined by Bo Matt. Say hi, Bo Matt.
Hi, Bo Matt.
And we are entering into semifinals number one. This semifinals will include two decorated players from Magic the Gathering dipping their toes into the Lorcana space, and one of which is someone who is in the Magic Hall of Fame. That's
Yeah,
Frank Karsten. Let's take a look at Frank Karsten's player slide because Frank is a decorated player from uh, I don't know, a long history in playing and writing about Magic the Gathering. He's going to be playing Amber Steel Stitch Blitz. This deck is low to the ground, hyper aggressive, plays Lilo, Stitch, Captain Hook, and Simba. Future King, and leans into Simba Bodyguard to protect early. Has big refresh effects on resources for spreading all of your resources thin from the one drops by using Stitch Rockstar to replenish, as well as a whole new world off of Ariel Spectacular Singer's Singer 5 ability.
yeah. Frank's opponent in this semifinals is going to be Harlan Fear playing the Team NDA deck Amber Sapphire, and Amber Sapphire they came prepared to deal with the more mid-range versions of Amber Steel, but more aggressive lists like Frank's have been giving them some amount of trouble. Our other semifinals, Don Deloge also playing an aggressive Amber Steel list with Lilos, and there's not a whole lot of early defense in this Amber Sapphire list.
Yeah, Harlan Fear is a member of Team NDA here in the Lorcana Invitational. Him, Brennan DeCandio, and Mason Clark all bringing this Amber Sapphire Rapunzel deck, and two of them making it into the top four, but they got their work cut out for them. Well, the players are about ready in the feature match area, so let's head on down there and see who takes it down in our first semifinal match between Hall of Famer Frank Karsten and decorated SEG Tour player Harlan Fear. Now, what I expect from this match is these players will essentially spend their first few turns developing. Karsten will play characters, Harlan will play ramp effects, and their goal is to assemble larger characters or some songs that will essentially give back to their resources after using so many.
Right. See how Frank's early curve develops. There's at least a Simba Future King, and looks like as a 2-drop Aladdin Cornered Swordsman. Usually, Amber Steel players are looking to protect their 1-drops with Simba Protective Cub, but there's a lot less pressure coming out of the Amber Sapphire list to the point that a 1-drop into an aggressive 2-drop like Aladdin might be an even better start for Frank.
Yeah, and we know that the Ember Sapphire decks are not super well set up to defend against these early character rush decks, but Harlan, does know the matchup. These are open deck lists, and he likely mulliganed aggressively to have some of those early
Yeah,
drops to be able to be interactive. We'll see if he's able to do that, or if he just wants to use this one jump ahead on turn number two. Leela making a wish for Karsten, arguably the most aggressive character in the game. There are only two characters that cost one ink that can quest for two. That's Leela making a wish and Maleficent biding her time, I believe.
yeah, very good.
And those two characters are often associated with the more aggressive strategies in the format, but Lilo specifically is Amber, so it pairs up with the
Yeah,
powerful two-drop protective element of Simba Protective Cub, which keeps all those opposing two-cost and one-cost characters from challenging it.
Yeah, Frank Karsten preparing for this tournament was looking out for the best aggressive strategy and zeroed in on Lilo plus Simba, like you mentioned, and then decided Steel was the best pairing because it kind of lets you play two decks in one, which
Right.
those top end grind your elements, grab your sword, Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, and the like.
Here's a card that I've seen put in the inkwell quite a bit, but I
Yeah,
haven't seen it in play too much. This is Mr. Smee. Mr. Smee is a three-cost Amber card. It's a 2/5 quest for one, and it has no other abilities. But 5 willpower in a deck that plays Rapunzel is quite strong, and it's able to chew up either of the characters on the other side with ease. And Frank Carson's going to need some sort of bodyguard or something similar to protect from it if he wants to quest.
yeah. As far as defensive starts for turn three, this is the best Harlan can hope for. It is going to threaten Frank's characters, and you're right. This is the first time you've seen it in play, but this is a pretty good spot for it.
All right, Frank, essentially saying I'm okay to throw away these characters to your Smee because I have a punish next turn. He leads with Tiny Tactician. That Tinkerbell is often the precursor to the giant fairy that comes down and eats up your opponent's board. And we'll see if that's what Frank is setting up for. Harlan, meanwhile, can challenge with Smee and then use Rapunzel to draw some cards, and I think that'll likely be the turn sequence here, and we'll see if he has anything else in mind.
Yeah, and Harlan getting this value, you know, not great for Frank, but it's all right. The 1/5 body for Rapunzel is not going to be super effective, and if Frank does have a Giant Fairy follow up, that's a great way to deal with an exerted 5 willpower character.
Hmm.
But instead, Harlan is playing to the board. This is going to be much better at challenging Frank's characters than the Rapunzel would have been. So I like this from Harlan.
Right. He knows that he's going to get value out of Rapunzel no matter what. And
Yeah,
so he's choosing to establish a better board position so that he's able to challenge maybe with a bigger character, maybe double challenge into a different bigger character. And then Rapunzel comes down way later to refuel you, but it's more important that you can challenge.
exactly. We've actually seen several times in this tournament players have pretty big turns where they're spending all their ink, but then it turns out that ink was spent on maybe multiple Rapunzels or a Rapunzel and an Ariel, and they end up with not enough strength to challenge their opponent's boards. So I like this patience on the Rapunzel from Harlan quite a bit.
Okay, Frank here, maybe in a tight spot, considering his options. He's got a bunch of cards in hand with that aggressive start. He kind of threw away his Aladdin last turn, expecting to be able to perhaps rush down the Smee. Can still do that, but doesn't actually look that good in the face of the Maleficent Uninvited.
Yeah, now at this point, Frank is considering inking the Smash. Does go for that.
All right, for four, and we're going to shift the Tink, and then we can pass the turn, quest some, sing something, or challenge. So a lot of options at Frank's disposal. Let's see what he wants to do.
Yeah, if Frank challenges the Smee here, he ends up in a significantly worse spot against Rapunzel out of Harlan. The Tinkerbell does get to put 2 damage on the Maleficent, but then Harlan's gonna start out his turn with a Rapunzel, and then be able to freely take down the Tinkerbell with the Maleficent.
All right, looks like
So that's what Frank is trying to play around
right.
here.
He's sniffing it out, and he's trying to feel like, hey, what's the best way to handle this? And maybe it's just sing, And then the Maleficent can, or sorry, the Rapunzel can come down to heal the Smee for 3 and draw 3. But then when the two other characters attack into the Rapunzel, it's not so bad. You got a handful, so here it is. Gonna sing whole new world. Discards 2 and drawing 7. Harlan discards 3 and draws 7. I actually really like Harlan's spot here. I thought that this
Yeah.
matchup would be quite bad, but Frank's start didn't include a Simba bodyguard, and so Annie was on the draw, and Harlan was able to ramp up with the one jump ahead. So here we are.
Yeah.
Harlan gets first crack at all the fresh resources, and we'll see how it goes.
And every one of those factors has really been important, right? The Simba would have been impactful. Frank being the first player would have been impactful, but things lined up for Harlan. This Mr. Smee came down and kind of started taking control of the board.
Okay, not the best answer for the shifted Tinkerbell, if you ask me, and let
Yeah.
it go, giving Frank 2 more ink to utilize these 7 cards that he just drew. But it does allow Harlan to use the rest of his ink this turn to deploy some characters and to solidify his board position. He has a Smee with 4 damage on it. That is potentially dead to a Grab Your Sword or a Tinkerbell Giant Fairy next turn. Interesting. We're gonna.
And Harlan, off that whole new world, discarded 2 copies of Rapunzel. So without another in hand, decides he's going to play Hades, pick up that Rapunzel, because now we're at the point in the game where the healing on Rapunzel is really meaningful, right? Either on this Mr. Smee or on the Maleficent, that's going to enable 1, maybe 2 extra challenges out of those characters for Harlan.
Okay. Going back to Frank Karsten, we have the Hall of Famer here with 8 cards in hand after the draw step. We're going to start off with a Be Our Guest. I said this multiple times yesterday, but whenever you are ahead on board and your opponent leads with a card draw effect or a dig effect and they're spending ink to do it, oftentimes that means that their hand is extremely weak and they're in a horrible position. Now, what that also means is sometimes is they just have a bunch of extra resources, and thanks to the Let It Go on the Tinkerbell shift, we did get 2 extra ink to work with. So maybe looking for something a little more specific, like a Tinkerbell Giant Fairy to set up a next turn. But he knows that Harlan has that Rapunzel, and that is just a non-starter.
Absolutely. And the Amber Steel deck especially the aggressive versions, one of their best strategies against Amber Sapphire can be to go really wide. You know, there are no sweepers in Amber Sapphire, no grab your sword or anything like that. But at this point in the game now, Harlan has three characters, Frank has none. Frank is at best kind of going to be keeping up with Harlan's board, but most of Frank's characters are just going to be smaller.
Right, and this is exactly the spot Harlan wants to be in. You know, if you have character advantage on turn 5 or 6 against Amber Steel Stitch Blitz, you are ecstatic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if you're not like
Dead.
facing down 17 lore on the
Yeah,
other side.
exactly.
We've had some extremely explosive starts from Amber Steel Stitch Blitz over the course of the tournament, and Frank here with a decent draw. You know, went 1, 2, 3, 4, but didn't go multiple characters on any of the turn. Harlan had the answer many times.
And again, he was going second, so
Right.
not the pressure didn't actually amount to much by the time Harlan was able to get to Mr. Smee down.
Okay. Here is Lantern into Tinkerbell and Hook, Forceful Duelist. And now we're going to go back Harlan's way and not really scared of what's going on the other side. And he's still got a grip full from that previous cast, Whole New World. And we'll see what he wants to do on this turn where he's getting untapped with, I don't know, 8 ink if he wants to play another one.
Yeah, I do think this is one of the better follow-ups Frank could have had. You know, you don't love starting with that BR guest, but the Tinkerbell and the Captain Hook means that this was a setup turn for Frank.
Mhm.
He's setting himself up to be better able to respond to whatever Harlan does with some better challenges, likely a shifted giant fairy. But you know, Harlan was already ahead, and he's still ahead after these plays. So Frank just kind of putting himself in a better position, but I don't know if it'll be good enough.
All right, Harlan here. Grinding. Seems to be our guest. Finds.
I like it.
And then go ahead and plays Hades Infernal Schemer to knock off the Tinkerbell. This is continuing to disrupt the development from Karsten and specifically prevents a shift Tinkerbell Giant Fairy plus attack. And maybe that was what Frank was trying to set up for. Now we're going to go back Frank Karsten's way and see what he can do. Has access to a lot of ink and a lantern. That Hook can go in and challenge the Smee or the Hades, but it can't quite take out the Maleficent Uninvited, who does quest for 3.
Right, and Frank not bringing any copies of Fire the Cannons. As far as interaction, Frank has 1 copy of Smash, 4 copies of Grab Your Sword, and then some incidental damage from Tinkerbell Giant Fairies.
Right.
But that it takes a lot to add up to just one of these larger willpower characters from Amber Sapphire.
And as you see, Harlan has 6 willpower, 6 willpower, 5 willpower, and a 2 willpower character in play, and like his whole deck is just trending on big old butts.
Yeah.
Carefree Surfer draws 2 cards after a Prince Eric, and 9 ink at the ready for Frank, and able to use all of it and draw 2 more. Thanks to that lantern.
The lantern and 3 ink off Let It Go and Hades.
Sure,
Let's not forget that.
Okay, Frank here can still play an ink for turn and play this Lilo, Making a Wish. Maybe that's what he's thinking about.
Yeah, Frank at this point kind of has to look for his specific routes to victory in this game. You know, playing from a position where you're behind. Lilo is a pretty efficient way to get lore into play, but at this point, almost certainly only going to get to quest once, even against Amber Sapphire.
All right, so see what Frank wants to use the Hook to challenge. That's the only character where the ink is not wet. It was played on the previous turn, but these 3 characters, Prince Eric, Carefree Surfer, and Lilo, just came down. Feels bad to trade off with Smee. You know, it already has 4 damage on it, and so a featured giant fairy or something similar could kill it incidentally. Can't quite challenge into the Maleficent, but you can trade for Hades, and it does have 3 strength, so maybe worth doing that. Now, if Rapunzel in hand for Harlan, which we know is there, it might be worth killing the Smee just to prevent that big burst of resources.
Yeah, I didn't catch which cards Frank drew off this Carefree Surfer, but I suspect there might be a Grab Your Sword in there, and that's definitely a way for Frank to work back into this game, start chewing into this willpower on Harlan's side, you know, several characters at a time, which suggests that might be why he saved this Captain Hook to be able to team up with the Grab Your Swords rather than just trading for a Hades, for example.
All right, clean turn for Harlan. We're going to play a Rapunzel, draw 3, and deploy another Maleficent Uninvited. We're going to quest for 1, 4, 6, 7, up to 11. Now back Frank's way, and we have our work cut out for us, but this Amber Steel Stitch Blitz deck does have a lot of tricks up its sleeve, including those AoE effects like, I keep saying AoE effects. It's like saying the ATM machine.
You know, I'm a linguistic descriptivist. I think AoE effect, ATM machine, people say them, therefore they work.
Oh, that's fair. The English language is ever evolving. Just the other day, they added YOLO to the dictionary. Do you know that?
I'm actually surprised it took that long, to be honest.
All right, here's a Simba, Protective Cub. We can quest for a little bit, but are we facing down lethal? I think we are. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So need to remove some stuff from the board here. Does Frank Karsten before next turn?
Yeah, I mentioned Grab Your Sword being a potential out, but then Harlan went ahead and added 11 more willpower to the board.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and play a whole new world and look at the top 7 and see if we can find one of those Grab Your Swords. If we don't, oh, we do. Okay, so we have a shot here. So we're going to start with this Grab Your Sword. We're going to get out the dice. Toot everything. Yep. Get out the dice!
Harlan, though, with a fresh hand.
What's up, Denny's?
Got our director Dan with that one.
Yeah. All right, toot everything.
Let's start counting up. 1 character dies. Yeah.
Okay.
Captain Hook and Prince Eric, pretty good at challenging, but only able to trade off here. I think we might have used the wrong. Or no, it's still 3. It's still 3.
Yeah, they both challenge for 3. Eric here can eat the Smee and not fall, but that still faces down 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So not quite lethal on the other side of things. We can also go Eric and Lilo making a wish into the Hades to knock it off, but instead Frank gonna value the 2 lore generation from the Lilo and gonna go after the Smee instead and play a Stitch New Dog, and we're gonna go back Harlan Fear's way with a fresh 7. Can't quite win the game this turn, but can probably win next turn. Let's see if he's able to assemble the 2-turn win and if Frank can challenge it.
Yeah, as long as Harlan holds off Frank on this particular turn, the Bell Strange but Special near the top of his hand is going to make it so that any other characters he adds to it will push him over the finish line. Frank questing with that Lilo and playing out a couple other characters does mean Harlan has to be concerned about Frank's lore total, but it should be pretty trivial for him to handle that.
All right. We have some characters lined up to maybe challenge. Rapunzel goes after the Lilo. Hades can challenge quite a bit here. I guess he has to challenge the Simba first. So
yeah.
That's probably locked in. Trying to navigate. That Grab Your Sword was quite brutal, especially in conjunction with the challenger characters to take out some of the bigger drops. We're going to go Hades eats Simba. Rapunzel eats Lilo making a wish. And now, Bell Strange but Special. This is going to threaten 5 lore generation next turn.
Yeah, the only way for Frank to get this Bell off the table would be 2 more Grab Your Swords. Beyond that, the smash in his deck is already gone.
Bell allows for an extra ink drop this turn too, and that means Hades Infernal Schemer is going to knock off Carefree Surfer, and we are churning here. Harlan can even eat the Eric if he wants, but instead going to quest for 3 and push towards the victory condition. And now we're going to go back to Frank Karsten, Hall of Famer of Magic the Gathering. We're going to see if he can handle Harlan Fear's robust board.
Yeah, the only thing to keep in mind from Harlan's seat is that the Stitch New Dog does represent a possible 3 lore instead of 1, thanks to the shift mechanic, but that still would only put Frank at 6 lore, up to 16, and that is not enough for Harlan to worry about.
Yep. He has an Aerial Spectacular Singer in hand, which could maybe find a Grab Your Sword, but doesn't deal with the Bell Strange but Special. And that is going to quest for 5 next turn, which means that Harlan essentially is winning unless Frank is able to kill Bell and a bunch of other stuff, or everything but Bell.
Yeah, Harlan kind of set aside those two readied characters at the bottom. They represent check, right? Those
Yeah.
two characters just by themselves are lethal. And Frank starting off this turn without a character that can sing really means he's going to be restricted on ink.
I'm gonna old guy you for a second. Is that okay?
Go for it.
All right. So, did you ever play Super Nintendo? I know you're too old or too young for it, but did you ever go back and play an old one?
I'm familiar.
So I grew up with Super Nintendo. It was my favorite system,
Uh-huh.
and one of my favorite games actually done. It's Chess Master,
Okay.
and the AI was pretty good, really good actually. But the sound effects were great, and whenever you put someone in check, it would go dun 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 check, and I just every time you say check, I just have that little sound bite in my head. So for maybe the one of you in chat who knows what I'm talking about, Chess Master Super Nintendo. Dun 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 dun. Check.
So Frank started out by shifting the Stitch Rockstar, played a hook to draw a card, found an aerial,
No!
found a grab your sword.
Whoa!
Wow.
I can't believe it.
Yeah, me neither.
I can't believe he was
And-
able to do that.
Frank kind of used every piece of the pie here. The
Oh my god, any quest for 6. Harlan, I'm so sorry.
quest for just 3, the Stitch had to sing this turn.
Oh, sorry.
But Frank did use every bit of ink. Shifting the Stitch gave him a discount on that grab your sword and also let him draw a card off this Captain Hook. And he found the out, but Harlan's going to keep putting on the pressure. Does need to find some interaction for this Stitch Rockstar.
Yep, not out of the woods yet. It's Frank Karsten even after that incredible turn. I was wasting talking about Chessmaster instead of just talking about this incredible sequence that Frank was able to cobble together. And, now Harlan is on the back foot, but we're still fairly close to winning the game. If we quest for 2, it puts us at 16. All we have to do is kill Rockstar, and that leaves 2, 3, 4, 5 on the other side of the table. And that's only 18, and we're threatening lethal. And if he has something like another Hades, that could be good, but we're going to go challenge him.
Yeah, because you said all we have to do is remove Stitch Rockstar. Harlan doesn't have any interaction available from hand,
Eesh.
so he has to take as much lore out of play as possible, and that means challenging that Aladdin, leaving Frank with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lore.
Okay, well, maybe we've done it. Here's a Bell Strange Special, and Karsten, I don't believe, has the ability to remove it anymore. He's gone through at
Yeah,
least 2
no more
Grab
in
Your
the
Swords.
deck.
I think there's 3 Grab Your Swords already played.
Yeah,
And
the
I
smash
think
has been
even
inked.
right. So it's going to be a scary sequence for Frank Karsten. I don't know if he has any more outs in the deck after he pulled a rabbit out of his hat last turn. And now I'm going to go back Karsten's way. Can you do it again? Miracle Man. David Blaine. All right. Got to survive the 8 minutes in the ice or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever David Blaine used to do.
Locked in a cage.
Yeah. Upside down in a water container.
Yeah, exactly. Bell, strange but special.
1, 2, 3. Grab your sword. 1, 2.
Yep.
Okay.
3, grab your sword. Meaning Frank has... Alright, you know what we need here? We need grab your sword plus 2 Tinkerbell Giant Fairy.
Well,
Which-
last turn was a pretty tall order. I think that one is like you're walking into the White House and you're asking for a
Yeah.
cheeseburger.
Sure,
You only get that if you're a football national champion.
that's true. Would do it though. This Amber Steel deck, very good at using the song mechanic. Not only with the Singer 5 on Aerial plus the 2 5-cost songs, but we even see in these tight spots, singing Be Our Guest can be relevant at finding the perfect characters to get the job done.
All right, Frank
Same.
just checking his deck one more time. If he goes wheeling, he needs to know that he has an out. Or what the outs are, what the sequence is. Because singing matters a bunch.
Yeah, usually a turn like this is going to involve one of these singers singing Whole New World, the other singing Grab Your Sword, and then the ink being used to play those Tinkerbells, because that's very specifically Frank's out here.
Okay, so Frank going through the iterations. has a Rapunzel he can play to draw 2 off the Prince Eric. That might be where we have to start. And then after that, get super lucky. We also have a Be Our Guest we can sing off the Prince Eric to look for something, and I think that's maybe where we'll start.
I think that's where you have to start because, like I said, double Tinkerbell is really your only out, and that's going to use too much of Frank's ink.
Okay, well, we're starting with a challenge Stitch Rockstar attacks, and this is going to give us 3 cards instead of 2 with the Rapunzel. So 1, 2, there's a grab your sword, 3. All right, we need one more thing to be able to handle that Bell Strange but special.
2 more. There are no more double damage sources in Frank's deck.
Right. Still not 100% that there's 3 grab your swords in the graveyard.
I am.
Okay. Well,
well, there's no Tinkerbell in that pile.
okay.
Oh,
yeah, well, yeah, okay. Now that actually 100% confirmed it
Yes.
because he had a bell, or sorry, he had an aerial and just said nope.
Yeah. All right, Frank does get a little more card draw through the Stitch Rockstar, but every ink he taps makes it that much harder to play out some Tinkerbells. I don't think it's possible for Frank to get there anymore. And we saw the previous turn, Harlan represented those 2 lethal characters at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to pick our 2 game-winning characters for Harlan are Belle and Mr. Smee, representing that 6 ink, 6 floor.
If Mr. Smee does not physically win the game himself, I'm going to riot.
Yeah.
Because it's all about Smee. Smee. What about me?
Yeah.
All right, game number 1 goes to Harlan Fear's Amber Sapphire deck. A long affair, thanks to the Whole New World and just both players having a lot of refreshes on their resources there, and Harlan able to take down a marathon of a game number 1. As these players are shuffling up here for game number 2, let's take a look at their deck so we can discuss the matchup a little more in detail, because these 2 players here, they've had open deck lists since the beginning of the tournament, but having perfect information about what the numbers are, how to play around all these sequences and stuff matters quite a bit. So from the Ember Steel Stitch Blitz side of things, what are some of the key cards that Frank really needs to look for now that he's going to be on the play?
So the best way we've seen Amber Steel take down this Amber Sapphire list is through pretty much wanton aggression. The key cards for that are Lilo Making a Wish, Simba Protective Cub, but more so in my opinion Aladdin Cornered Swordsman as a 2-drop for 2 lore. 2 of the best curves for Frank are going to be Lilo into Aladdin or Lilo plus 2 1-drops on turn 2 to really get the pressure on, especially on the play. Even Mr. Smee is going to be too slow to combat that.
Right. On the play with Ariel, Spectacular Singer, he's going to look to sing a whole new world ahead of schedule. But if it takes a little too long or it's turn 4 or 5, Harlan often is empty-handed thanks to Bell Strange but Special and a bunch of those ramp effects. I think that's something to look out for on the play, specifically if he's able to sing a whole new world on turn 4. I think that'll mean that he's in great shape, but anytime after that's going to be pretty rough. On the other side of the table, we have Team NDA's Harlan Fear, member of the Lost Boys, and he is playing the Amber Saph Rapunzel deck. This is 3 members into the top 8 of our Invitational playing this exact 60, and looks like 2 of them in the top 4, and they're looking quite good. Up a game here for Harlan, and is trying to make his way to the finals. On the draw here, what do you think he's looking for specifically when he's mulliganing?
So we do have 4 copies of Stitch New Dog to contest the early game and kind of require a Simba Protective Cub out of Frank. As far as that, just a couple more 2-drops in Grammatala. If you're trading off with a Lilo, trading off for a Lilo with a Grandma, you're pretty happy about that, but it's going to be a little slow on the draw. And that's about it as far as defensive tools for Harlan go. As long as he gets off to a good enough start, or Frank misses a little, Harlan can progress into that mid game where his characters really start outsizing Frank's, and he can take over the board.
Right. All right. Well, let's head on back down to the feature match area as these players are finishing shuffling after looking at each other's deck lists. We're going to get mulligans out of the way, but while we do that, let's take a moment and thank our sponsors. TCGplayer.com is your one-stop shop for all things card related, whether it's Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and now Disney's Lorcana. Make sure to check out tcgplayer.com for your singles, and make sure to check out TCG Player Infinite. That's their article side of things, where they showcase strategy for all the games that they sell cards for, including Disney's Lorcana. The Lost Boys actually had two different articles go up this week, one on the expected metagame, and then one on the players with their profile and the actual metagame. Head on over to tcgplayer.com today. I want to say thank you to Ultimate Guard for sponsoring the event. They have excellent TCG products such as the Boulder deck box, the Katana sleeves, as well as the Archive deck box. The Archive deck box is great for cubes, holding so many cards, as well as Commander decks, since it's big enough to hold actually boxes of Commander decks, right?
Oh, wow.
So it has enough space for you to put a full box Commander deck in there already.
Nice.
And then the Katana sleeves are best on the market. Also, shout out to Cards and Castles 2, our last sponsor, a free-to-play Steam game, a tactics card battler, and we've been showing some videos of gameplay of that when I played the demo earlier in the week, and it's a lot of fun, and it's free to play. Make sure to head on to Steam. We'll link it in the Twitch chat for you, but Steam for Cards and Castles 2, and use code Apex Gaming for 5 free booster packs. Now, we're going to start game number 2 here. Frank Karsten going to be on the play, looking to mulligan some of these more expensive songs since he doesn't have aerial and they're not inkable. Wants to have a nice little 1-2-3 curve, maybe even a 1-2 and then a bunch of ones or a bunch of 1s and 2s on turn 3 as well, and really spread it out.
Yeah, that's how we saw Frank win one of his camera matches yesterday, was multiple 1-drops in the early turns. And here we go. Looks like 4 cards for Harlan and 3 or 4 for Frank.
All right, both players here mulliganing quite a bit in order to look for the more specific things that they need in the early turns. For Harlan, it's going to be a defensive stance. For Frank, it's going to be hyper aggressive. He's looking for Lilo, making a wish. He's looking for Simba, protective cub. And if he's able to start with that 1-2 punch, it's going to be very difficult for Harlan to keep up. His deck is more focused on beating the other mid-range decks and the control decks in the format with those ramp effects into the big card draw spells, and the Amber Steel deck loves playing against that type of thing.
Yeah, the other player in our semifinals playing Amber Steel, Dawn DeLozier, pretty similar list to Frank's, and in her preparation she kind of specified that the mulligan system is one of the things she's looking to exploit in this game, specifically by trying to hit Lilo plus Simba as often as possible.
Okay, we're underway here. Frank Karsten going to be on the play. See what he wants to start with.
You saw Frank pulling that Aladdin Cornered Swordsman to the front as ink, and then reconsidering and playing a Giant Fairy instead to get this Lilo down. I like that.
Okay, well, Lilo versus Stitch. They're going to go wrestling here in just a minute unless Frank Karsten has some sort of protection like Simba, protective cub, and we do. And so we get to quest for 2. We know there's no punish from Harlan's side of thing on turn 2, and that's a free quest there. So +2 for Frank and back Harlan's way.
Almost certainly multiple free quests from both of these characters now. Frank is off to a good start, and there's not a whole lot Harlan can do, especially on the draw, to combat it. But there's a grandma that can kind of team up to take down these characters, but it's going to be a while before Harlan can play interaction from hand and actually efficiently answer Simba.
Okay, so just going to quest, not going to run into the Simba and cause some potential problems later with Rapunzel. And now we're going to go back Frank's way, and we can eat the Stitch on the other side, or we can just quest for 3, and I think quest for 3 is probably what's going to be what happens. Frank may have Aerial Spectacular Singer this turn, leading into something like Grab Your Sword or Whole New World next turn, and this is the ideal 1-2-3 start if you're Amber Steel on the play for sure.
Yeah, we talked about Harlan's tools to combat some of Frank's starts being these early characters, but Frank's deck is actually capable of punishing that strategy, like you said, with Grab Your Sword. And the fact that this Aerial didn't find a Whole New World, but Frank does have one in hand, means it's a little bit concealed, and Frank might just run away with this.
Yeah, we're going to go questing for 3 here, up to 5. And Harlan is going to be able to run both characters into the Simba to clear it, but he's going to need some more help on his turn to be able to challenge next turn. And that means that at least 2 more or 3 more lore is coming next turn for Frank, and maybe even a song too. Well, There's
Mr.
Mr. Smee.
Smee.
Yeah, Mr. Smee comes on. That's a good one, and that's one that actually hard carried last game. Never even died, I don't think.
Right. So Lilo, time kind of running out unless Frank can find a second Simba, but has quested already for 4 this game. Gonna get up to 6. And wonder if Frank's gonna be able to set up a whole new world in these next few turns, but that Simba is gonna
Whole
be
new next
perfect.
few turns. What about right now? What about let's sing it? You discard 4, 5. I'll discard 2. I draw 7 after playing a protective cub, and I can still use 2 more ink to play 1 or 2 more characters. Seems pretty good.
Yeah, this is a board position that it can take a few turns for Harlan to dig his way out of, even with a 7 card hand. His cards are a little more expensive.
So Frank actually had maybe one of the worst draw 7s I've seen in a while. I
Oh,
think
yeah.
he didn't even find a character to play for 2, so it's only going to be our guest.
Yeah, it's a pretty expensive hand. A couple copies of Grab Your Sword and/or Whole New World, a couple Tinkerbell Giant Fairies, and then I don't know if we hit another cheap character off this Be Our Guest either.
Yeah, looks like we're probably going to take another Tinkerbell, and we're going to put 2 Grab Your Swords on the bottom. So still not ideal for Frank. Does have a rock star that he can maybe play in a turn or two, but right now his hand just looks really gummed up.
Yeah, Frank talked about and liking the fact that he has 2 strategies in one deck here, but unfortunately you can kind of run into problems sometimes with that. Frank really wants to prioritize the aggressive side of the deck,
Right.
but has kind of drawn the other half instead, the more grindy mid range, and is going to be kind of forced into playing a game that he is maybe less likely to win against the larger characters.
Yeah, you talk about like 2 different decks in one, and it's because there are some type packages that allow your deck to operate on a different wavelength, and it's a very small amount of cards that allow
Yeah.
you to do that. Tiny Tactician and Tinkerbell Giant Fairy combined with Rapunzel allow for you to challenge your opponent's stuff, and that combination of things is one of the reasons why Steel is one of the better additions to the deck, on top of the Grab Your Sword and Whole New World, which pairs so nicely with Ariel Spectacular Singer.
Yeah.
Gonna go back Harlan's way after the Be Our Guest resolves, and we'll see what Harlan can do. We have a fresh 8 after the draw 7 plus draw step, and we'll see if we want to go maybe Bell, Strange of Special, and start ramping a bit. Starts with 4. There it is, Bell, Strange of Special, and now he's going to ink probably 2 things and maybe play a 1 or 2 drop. He's going to start with You Have Forgotten Me, a card that's normally pretty decent against the control decks and pretty weak when your opponent just drew 7 cards. Going to play a new dog, challenge the Simba, and say go. That's dangerous because now Frank has the ability to heal it with Rapunzel if it's in hand, and we just see it. So this could be really bad for Harlan.
Yeah, healing Rapunzel here, maybe singing Grab Your Swords just to continue shrinking Harlan's board. You don't really, if Frank can find the right tools, he doesn't really have to worry about the long game. If he can just keep Harlan off his back a little bit longer, this Lilo plus a couple other characters can cross the finish line.
Right.
And I think he has the tools to do so at this point.
I do too. I think singing Grab Your Sword here clears the new dog, deals 2 more to the Smee and 2 to the Bell, but it allows the Simba to actually challenge the Smee and kind of clear Harlan's side of things a bit so that his board is relatively stifled, and it prevents something like opposing Rapunzel's from healing something that's relevant in combat, maybe.
Now, the reason Harlan took that last turn to play Bell and develop a couple extra ink is because out of the interaction in his deck, he has 5 cost Let It Go and 7 cost Hades. So if he wants to interact with this board, it looks like all he has is Hades at the moment, and had to get himself up to that 7 ink break point. So he might be able to kind of pull this house of cards apart a little bit, depending on whether Frank uses Grab Your Sword.
Maybe he doesn't have Grab Your Sword. He did put 2 on the bottom earlier with the Be Our Guest. I see a Whole New World over there and some Tinkerbell Giant Fairies, but I don't see the powerful 5 cost Steel Song that's the bane of every aggressive deck, and it would have been quite good here with Ariel for sure.
Yeah, so without a Grab Your Sword, Harlan gets to get a little bit creative on combinations of challenges. Maybe starting off with a cleaner answer to Simba in a Hades, and then taking down a couple smaller characters with the rest. And Frank, those readied characters represent 3 lore, but if Lilo leaves the battlefield, Frank is kind of hampered on lore development.
Right. Okay, let's see what Harlan has here. I didn't quite see a Hades Infernal Schemer in hand. Oh,
No,
there
there
it
it
is.
is.
Okay. I saw Let It Go. I think
It's
it
big
was
and
in the
blue.
back of the hand. Well, it was in the back of the hand a second ago, and then he moved it to the front. Give me a break.
I love Hades.
I don't have ESPN, okay? I can't just, like, know what he's talking about and doing over there.
Don't have ESPN. I don't even understand. Anyway,
It's an old joke, man. I'm sorry.
okay. Ah, wait.
I understood it.
I got there eventually.
Every
Little
every
slow
old
poke.
guy knows what that joke is because they said it in a bunch of movies back in the 90s and 2000s, I think.
Hades, Infernal Schemer, does take down Simba.
Bye. And now we get some challenging in. We can double bang on the aerial and knock it off and take care of the Lilo and clear these two exerted characters. That does leave us slightly vulnerable to Tinkerbell Giant Fairy if we don't challenge correctly. It also leaves us in a weird spot against the Captain Hook, but we're able to get all this off the table.
Yeah, and you're right. That was some careful challenging from Harlan there. Noticed Frank did not take an opportunity to play a grab your sword on the previous turn,
Yep.
so leaves his characters very specifically with 2 willpower remaining instead of 1.
Harlan has the option to play an extra ink here thanks to the bell, strange but special. Deciding on whether or not he wants to hold the Be Our Guest for a cast or to play it now as an ink.
And this is a pretty specific skill that you see card game players develop through a lot of experience is hand reading. So 2 turns ago after the Whole New World, Frank wasn't able to play any smaller characters, just played a Be Our Guest, meaning you can narrow down to maybe some of the clunkier cards in Whole New World, Grab Your Sword, and Tinkerbell, and then the fact that Grab Your Sword didn't come down on the following turn suggests to Harlan that there's, one, maybe multiple copies of Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, and very specifically plays in a way to avoid losing to that card.
Right. Nicely said. And Harlan here, hyper aware of the things that Frank could have due to open deck lists as well as format knowledge. He's played a ton of games on Pixel Worn with this Amber Sapphire deck and just in general, testing everything out for the event. Put in a lot of work as we were, talking about all of this stuff, including this main event on the Lost Boys podcast over the last few weeks. Now, Frank, considering his options, if he plays a Giant Fairy here, the Rapunzel can trade up for the Bell, and then Hook can trade for Smee no matter what. Or, you can get both if you have the Tinkerbell and you want to do that.
Yeah, Frank had a great start and some good turns in there, but kind of ran out of the right kind of gas and has had slightly slower lore development. I like this though, Stitch Carefree Surfer. The Tinkerbell Giant Fairies weren't going to be getting a lot done, so Frank is kind of keeping on the pressure, though Carefree Surfer pretty vulnerable to the single target removal that Harlan's deck does have available.
Yeah, Karsten seems like he's running out of steam a little bit. We're going to challenge the Bell in Quest for 2. It's going to allow Harlan to challenge back and kill the Rapunzel with what he's got in play without losing a character. So if he has Let It Go or another Hades Infernal Schemer, it's going to be quite bad for Frank.
Yeah, Harlan also has the option of singing that Let It Go and playing a couple more characters if Frank has slowed down enough that the Rapunzel becomes less of a threat.
Okie dokie. Let's see what old Frankie can do about this. But first, Harlan needs to do something about this Rapunzel in the Carefree Surfer. See how he wants to take care of it. He has to Be Our Guest. I think that's what he's really considering. Do I play Be Our Guest here before I do anything else? Or maybe I sing it with the Smee. And then if we're going to sing Let It Go with Hades, that makes it easier. So he has access to all 7 ink. And so if his Be Our Guest finds another Carefree Surfer or another Hades, that can be backbreaking.
Yeah, that's a great point. Harlan has multiple, card draw, card filtering options in Be Our Guest and Rapunzel, but the fact that it doesn't cost him any ink to do this leaves him open to the best possible hits, as opposed to, tapping half of his ink for a Rapunzel and being kind of restricted after that.
All right, plays Be Our Guests. Takes a look at the top 4. Can put a character in hand. Let's see what he wants to go for.
Yeah, I did see a few options.
Here's a Grammatala. Not what you want to find, but it's ink. You can also play it if you think you'll be able to use that challenge next turn and turn it into ink and deal damage. Or maybe sing a song later.
Yeah, a turn with Let It Go, Maleficent, and Grammatala here is a pretty good refill of the board.
All right, here is Maleficent Uninvited, and we're going to sing Let It Go. Let it go, let it go. Stitch to the inkwell, let it go. Okay, I'll stop. Sorry.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I can't hit those notes
You
unless I do a baritone. Those
look,
notes get way too high.
you have a lot more practice singing. Be prepared.
That's
That's just
true.
how the metagame goes.
That's true. All right. Next time I go to karaoke, I'll do the my falsetto. Let it go. How about that?
I
Let it go. Let it go.
I think I would pay to hear you filling up a room,
Well, you do
really
it for
using
free.
your full voice.
You get it for free, baby. All you gotta do is
Awesome.
ask. I love putting on a show.
All right.
Hell, we got karaoke in the basement back home. All right, back Carson's way. In Dire Straits and other old bands.
Yeah, what Frank is really looking to do and has been hoping to do for the past couple turns is flood the board with smaller characters that Harlan's deck has more of a weakness to. Let's see if he's finally found what he needs to put on that end game pressure.
Okay, 6 costs. Are we going for Tinkerbell? No. Stitch Rockstar. We're gonna play Simba.
I wonder at this point, Harlan is pretty low on cards in hand, though Frank doesn't know about the Rapunzel. Frank could consider just loading the board up with readied characters to try to cross the finish line, but instead decides drawing a card is still going to be important here and throws the Stitch new dog into the meat grinder.
All right, and we're gonna play Simba. So Rapunzel gonna quest for 2. Frank says, you know what? I think the only way I win is to burn you out. I'm gonna play character and quest, play character and quest, play character and quest, and now gonna go back Harlan's way. He's gonna need some help because Frank's at 15 already. Where'd
Yeah.
that come from?
Frank's Rapunzel requiring multiple challenges does slow down Harlan meaningfully if he wants to get it off the table, but Harlan's Rapunzel in turn is going to be pretty good here.
Gonna draw 3 cards and heal the Shmee. The Shmee. And now Harlan here gonna line up some challenges. Gotta kill a couple things here to not be dead on board. The Stitch Rockstar questing for 3 next turn is pretty terrifying. Doesn't have an answer in hand. I think this one might be over. We can clear so we're not dead next turn, but I don't see Harlan getting out of this one.
Yeah, definitely one of the weaknesses of Amber Sapphire. The interaction, it's powerful, but it's expensive, and there's only so much you can play in Amber Sapphire.
Right. If you'll notice too, Frank early in the game took a very quest direct position.
Yes.
And started finding spots to try to quest with characters that he wasn't really that upset if they died because they were able to generate the lore. And what ended up happening though is that he created too many diverse and annoying targets for Harlan. And even though Harlan had a bunch of ways to challenge, a bunch of ways to punish, Frank's at 15. You know,
Yeah.
That just cannot be understated. He's at 15, and this game has been very close. And he's just knocking on the door over the next 2 turns to win the game.
Yeah, and if Frank sees this Stitch stick around, sniffs out that there's no removal in Harlan's hand, he kind of gets the green light. I'm just going to quest with this Rockstar, load up several readied characters, and Harlan's not going to be able to come back from that.
All right, well, we get to do some questing and play some characters. And there it is, shifted Stitch Rockstar, and that's going to end the game. Frank Karsten takes game number 2. We're going to be moving to a deciding game here in our first semifinal match between these 2 juggernauts of the game of Magic the Gathering. They are both dipping their toes into Lorcana. This is our first big event that we are putting on here at the Apex Gaming home store in Caldwell, Ohio, but it certainly won't be the last. We're looking to do a bunch of tournaments next year for Lorcana, especially once there's a big print run for Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. People can get their hands on cards more. It's been hard to get cards.
Yeah, that's true. Harlan actually playing with cards owned by a fellow Lost Boy, Zach Weaver, tonight because his original source fell through.
Yeah, Zach Weaver is actually a valuable member of the team. He's been producing some quality articles over on our Patreon. All those are free to read. You can check out the Lost Boys Patreon at Lost Boys LOR, and you can check out all of Zach's cool articles. We had one that go up today that was the expected meta, or it went up this week. It was about the expected metagame for the event and his picks for what the best decks were. Amber Stitch Blitz, as well as Ruby Amethyst were at the top of the list, very obviously.
Yep.
But he even called the Sapphire Amber deck. I don't know
Oh yeah.
if you read that article yet, but yeah, he called it. He said this deck looks like it's in a prime position. So, what else we got? Well, as these players are shuffling up here for game number 3, they are playing for $2,000 up top. There were $5,000 in cash and prizes here for the Lost Boys Lorcana Invitational. Each of these players has locked up $500 for top 4. The winner of this match will be gifted $1,000, and then first place is $2,000. Thank you so much to our sponsors for helping provide the prize pool for the event. Thank you so much to Ultimate Guard, Cards and Castles 2, and TCGplayer.com.
Yeah, you mentioned Ruby Amethyst. A little bit of an upset in our quarterfinals. Yesterday, 2 of our 3 Ruby Amethyst players ended up going 3-0 and being the first to lock up their berths into the top 8. But then both players, Nathan Stoyer and Matt Campo, lost in the quarterfinals. So we have no more Ruby Amethyst control remaining in this event.
Yeah, and there were only 3 archetypes in the top 8. There were 2 copies of Ruby Amethyst, 3 copies of Amber Steel Stitch Blitz, and 3 copies of this new Amber Sapphire ramp deck that Team NDA is playing. And with 1 member in top 4 already, Harlan's looking to make it 2. Unfortunately for them, their teammate and friend Brendan DeCandio was dispatched in the previous round.
Yeah, I think you may have misspoke. These players are already in the top 4.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant they're in the top 4. They're playing. Sorry, I'm dumb.
Playing for the finals. Harlan really looking to make it a team finals of both Mason and Harlan.
Okay, these players are going to be drawing open hands here and deciding on mulligans. Harlan's mulligan decisions will be significantly different when on the play versus the draw. I think looking for 1 jump ahead and Mickey Mouse Detective, as well as maybe Bell Strange Special to help ramp and get to Carefree Surfer and the Hades Infernal Schemers as early as possible.
Yeah.
Because I think getting a foothold on the board is its easiest way to win the game. Not so much trying to challenge through Simba Protective Cub, because that just hasn't worked so far.
Right. One of the curves you'll see sometimes that could be effective against one of those aggressive starts. Mickey Mouse Detective into a turn 4 Let It Go is one way to take down a Lilo before it's requested more than 2 times. We saw a pretty good big mulligan here from Harlan, throwing away 5, maybe 6 cards.
Yeah, just super digging here for those specific effects. Their Amber and Sapphire deck just looks so cool and a bit different than basically anything that we've seen in the metagame for the last few months. You know, it's pretty much dominated by Ruby Amethyst, and then Amber Steel creeping up to challenge that deck with a whole new world. But those 2 decks, I think, just really pushing out the rest of the competition, but all 3 of them making it to the elimination rounds, and the deck looks quite good, even in what I would consider to be a bad matchup here.
Exactly. The aggressive decks are not exactly what this team was hoping to see in these elimination rounds. But speaking of the metagame, the past couple weeks there have been a couple Amber Sapphire lists cropping up, and that's what caught Brennan and Harlan's interest. They decided to improve that deck, and one of their first cuts was Maximus Relentless Pursue. We just decided that does not fit the strategy.
Well, one thing that they have that they don't have that someone else had in our last chance qualifier is 4 copies of Lantern. They're instead opting to play 1 jump ahead so that they can utilize the ink that you generate on non-characters.
Yeah, that and one of the better ramp curves, Grammatala into Sung 1 jump ahead. Harlan here deciding Stitch is enough defense and inking a Grammatala is interesting to instead play a Be Our Guest.
Well, maybe looking for something to fill out the curve, but also just understanding that if Grammatala is on the table, Karsten can choose to play around it.
Yeah.
And also the body on Grammatala, not necessarily that great, except against combo killing Simba Protective Cub next turn, if that's what Frank wants to go for. But with Hook being the play for Karsten, I don't even know what he's planning on doing over the next few turns, but I doubt it's Simba plus Quest. You know, that seems like a very awkward line that can leave you in a vulnerable position, and so he's likely sculpting his hand to maybe even deploy 2 more 1-drops next turn, I think, or maybe something like Aladdin, Cornered Swordsman, or Prince Eric.
That's true, but a lot of the time on the draw against a one drop from your opponent, these games have a tendency to settle into the more mid-range versions of this Amber Steel deck.
Yep.
So let's see what the follow-up is here.
Well, he doesn't want to expose his characters to any trades when he can set up a grab your sword in a few turns. And
Right.
if he has an aerial spectacular singer, he can maybe find one. Or if he already has that rolled up, he's basically just never going to quest, never going to challenge, going to wait for Harlan to build up a big board, and then he's going to dismantle it with that big sweeper effect.
Yeah, but a good follow-up here from Harlan in Mr. Smee. This
Smee,
2/5
Smee.
body
What about me?
lines up pretty well against most of the early cards from Frank's deck.
All right, chat. Let me get an F in chat if you like my quips and sound effects. Because if you do, I'll keep doing them. But if you hate them, I'll just get out of here. I'll just leave. I'll let Matt do the rest of the broadcast. I have a bunch of little bits because I've just seen like every movie that has ever been made. You know?
Yeah.
Any F's in chat? Oh, a couple. Okay, all right. I'll keep doing it for y'all. Y'all the real OGs. You the real MVP. Here's an aerial spectacular singer. Top 4 gonna go to the bottom.
And yeah, no hit off the aerial, but setting up options really, right, is what the Singer 5 ability allows Frank. He can sing and grab your sword and play some other cards, maybe some other interaction, or just being able to play out his hand and play a whole new world. Options are the name of the game. Timing is very important with both of those cards.
Okay, gonna go back Harlan's way. No questing. Doesn't want to expose his characters to being challenged by the Mr. Smee. The body on Mr. Smee at 2/5. Look at this card on the screen because Mr. Smee is I don't know. It looks safe on paper. You look at this card. It's a 3-cost character from Amber. It's a 2/5 with no abilities and only quest for 1. But what it really represents is a juggernaut in the early turns for stomping on the 1 and 2 cost characters and giving you a powerful enough willpower to make things like Rapunzel truly terrifying if you want to quest. And so it says, hey, you can't quest for a while.
Yeah. Brennan said willpower equals cards, and that's both true in a literal sense with Rapunzel and kind of a virtual sense if you can trade off for as many as 3 characters with a Mr. Smee.
Does that mean that Carefree Surfers like draw 4?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so too. It's pretty good.
For any Hearthstone players, this team also described Carefree Surfer as Ancient of Lore plus Ancient of War.
You know, I think that there was a time in Hearthstone where they allowed you to fuse the 2 abilities, and sometimes you got to do both of them at the same time and on those choices or whatever. And I just remember it being one of the most powerful things that you could do. All right, back to the action here. Frank, on turn 4, has the ability to sing, grab your sword, to kill Stitch and deal some damage to the opposing characters, but I don't know that he has the ability to clear, especially not the Smee.
Yeah, a partial grab your sword here would be all right, but your opponent can then kind of take back the initiative with a Rapunzel healing up one of these characters. But we are in the staring back and forth at each other, waiting for someone to make a move part of the game.
All right, Karsten, looking to sing. We're going to start it off here. Grab your sword. 2 to everything. Stitch new dog down. Can't keep a new dog down. No, 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 no. Now what? Questing? No? Yes? Maybe so?
Yeah, it's tough.
Simba.
Simba does help. Neither Belle nor Smee will be able to take down Simba, meaning if you're not worried about interaction from Harlan, you could quest with these cheaper characters, but Belle means that Harlan is actually representing a Hades Infernal Schemer possibly next turn.
Yeah, but the aerial is pretty valuable as well, and I think that there's just enough valuable characters on the other side that questing makes sense because you're just already in trouble if he does have the Hades. And if he does have the Hades, that means he has to ink his other 2 cards and ends up with no cards in hand afterwards. Right. And so here we're seeing, we're going to do a double challenge, I bet, on the Simba, but we're going to start by playing Rapunzel and heal. We're going to draw 3.
Cards.
Now, he's actually thinking about healing the Belle instead to draw 2. That way the Belle sticks around. It does get 1 less card, but it keeps a character on the board, so it's basically the same.
Yeah, though, if one of the factors in toughness equaling cards is
willpower.
At some point, willpower equaling cards is at some point you start treating all willpower as the same, and
Right.
restoring 3 just that little bit better than restoring 4. Especially so many small characters from Frank means Harlan can really get the most out of every point of willpower.
Yeah, while he drew 3 cards, I don't think that he can play anything that relevant. Just a Mickey Mouse detective, and has another Rapunzel he can deploy next turn, and maybe a Maleficent uninvited. But nothing as interactive and powerful as Infernal Schemer. That 7-drop Hades is a focal point of his deck. But if you're Frank, you're ecstatic about this turn because your
Right.
characters didn't die.
Right.
Even though a lot of cards are drawn on the other side, your characters didn't die. You know what? That means they're going to quest again. It
Yeah.
also means you get to sing a whole new world.
And this is a pretty low tempo turn from Harlan. Got those two strength from those two characters, but 8 ink spent on them, or 7 rather, and did get to restore some willpower. But Frank's board is going to be kind of minimally contested here, though Aladdin pretty vulnerable to all of those characters.
Players here seem like they're having a pretty good time. Jovial chats back and forth, trying to figure out what to do this turn. Is Frank Karsten. He can sing a whole new world and then has 5 ink at the ready to deploy. But he knows Harlan is pretty light on resources himself, and it's comes with a steep cost to giving your opponent those 7 cards. And even after he sings, he's going to quest for 2, 4, 5, up to 8. Not quite close to threatening lethal anytime soon. And he's going to need a lot of help from the top of the deck, and Harlan's going to hope that his top of the deck is able to challenge back.
Personally, I think I kind of love a whole new world here.
Yeah.
We see, especially without Bell on the battlefield anymore, Harlan gonna have trouble kind of deploying the more expensive cards in his deck, and if Frank doesn't brick like he did last game a little bit, uh, his reload could be pretty tough for Harlan to deal with efficiently.
Okay, so we're looking at a hand that's got Rapunzels, Stitch Rockstars, expensive things. We wanted to draw a hand of cheap things. Looks like we drew at least one cheap thing. If it's Be Our Guest, you're very excited about that if you're Harlan.
Looks like a Simba.
Oh, you're not excited about that. Simba has been particularly difficult for him to deal with because his characters are often low strength, high willpower. That's the trade off. The higher the willpower,
Yeah.
often the lower the strength in this game.
And this Tinkerbell Tiny Tactician also going to be pretty relevant here. If Harlan wants to take care of these cornered swordsmen, his characters are going to be vulnerable to a shift. And I think Frank is in a pretty good position here. Harlan only going to be able to play so many cards with limited ink.
All right, well, we're going to quest up to 8, and after deploying the Cub for protection and the Tinkerbell for a big threat next turn on the Giant Fairy, we're going to go back Harlan's way and see what he can do. Looking through a hand, I see some interaction. He has access to a bunch of ink here, and after that whole new world, he's got to use it. Let's see what he's going to do to challenge what Carson's got going on because he's getting run down right now.
The only the only interaction in Harlan's hand is a single copy of Hades' Infernal Schemer, which does get the Simba out of the way. You can get some lore off the field, but that uses most of Harlan's turn for 7 ink, and Frank is going to start getting towards the higher part of his curve and start threatening to end the game.
Right. But, I mean, if you're Harlan, I mean, you're kind of bottlenecked, right? And that's
Yes.
where Frank put him. And Harlan now going to need some help off the top of the deck over the course of the next turn or two. But the baseline this turn that he can do is he can banish the Simba to the Inkwell with Hades, and then he can go challenge both of the Aladdin cornered swordsman and the Hook without losing a single character. That's going to open him wide up to the potential for Tinkerbell,
Yeah.
Tiny or Giant
Tech.
Fairy, and it's going to just be devastating.
When are we going to get Tinkerbell Giant Tactician?
I don't know.
What movie was that? Maybe also a Grab Your Sword from Harlan. Just gotta get this huge hand empty over the next few turns.
Okay, let's see what Frank can do. A lot of potential explosiveness here with a combination of cards. At 8, Lore can quest a little bit, but likely going to be using these characters to sing as well as challenge.
Yeah, this Tinkerbell Giant Fairy just looks excellent here.
Yeah,
right?
choose up 3 characters easily.
Yeah.
All right, one to everything, and then it's gonna attack the Rapunzel and finish off the Smee because one damage goes on to everything up to 3 and yada yada. Okay,
And
now
that's not even enough damage to allow Hades to trade back with the giant fairy, meaning it's just gonna get to stick around.
okay, can play Stitch New Dog, maybe Ink Rapunzel or something. Maybe he wants to hold on to the Rapunzel. Could also go ahead and play out this one cost Simba, the future king. Does allow him to loot away perhaps one of these weaker cards, but it looks like we're going to get really aggressive and play a new dog and a Lilo making a wish. Maybe you're going to ink the Rapunzel and play another one drop with the Simba, but maybe not.
Yeah, this is a great spot for Lilo. It's the most efficient way to get lore back onto the battlefield after this whole new world a couple turns ago, and Harlan has to use uh, pretty big resources if he wants to get rid of it before it quests for 2.
Hades, Lord of the Underworld, the 4-drop Amber card. Let's get that on the screen because that's a focal point of this Amber Sapphire deck
Yeah.
is Hades, Lord of the Underworld. It's normally good in these aggressive strategies for essentially creating a relentless threat package, but the Amber Sapphire deck is doing that with bigger characters like Carefree Surfer and Rapunzel to essentially create a wall of cards that decks like Ruby and Amethyst can't keep up with most of the time. We've seen Hades come down with no targets a decent amount in these Amber Sapphire versus Amber Steel matchups just to provide a body to start challenging and trading. But here it's going to be relatively good for getting back something. But we're in game 3. Harlan plays to be our guest. Looking at the top for a Hades Infernal Schemer. Doesn't find one, I don't think. And we might be in some serious trouble.
Yeah, the Hades Lord of the Underworld was one of the more appealing cards early on in the Lorcana metagame, but people quickly discovered, sometimes there's nothing in your discard pile, sometimes you really need ink, so the card can be a little bit awkward, but Harlan, Brennan, and Mason have found a pretty good home for it here in Amber Sapphire, especially with Belle.
One cool thing I want to point out about Karsten's play last turn, he actually quested with the aerial, and what that ends up doing is it encourages Harlan to challenge, and by encouraging him to challenge, it basically opens up Harlan to being just dumpstered by this Tinkerbell giant fairy, and
Yeah.
but the Maximus can definitely throw a rock in the I don't know, a rock in the shoe.
Yeah, throw that rock in the shoe.
Never
But
had a rock in your shoe before?
one of the better answers to these 5 willpower characters, especially exerted though, is Tinkerbell plus Tinkerbell. So if Frank has a second copy of Giant Fairy, he can really deal some damage.
Yeah, I'm not sure that he does, but if he does, it's going to be quite good here and allow for partial clear. Ooh, whole new world is a pickup here for Karsten and can sing that with the Tinkerbell if he doesn't have a good attack. We could start with Stitch New Dog or the Lilo into the Maximus, and then Tinkerbell can finish it off and deal 2 to the Hades, and then maybe the other character can trade for Hades. But Frank might not be interested in that at all. Frank might be saying, hey, I don't care anymore. We're just going to quest a bunch. 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 14. Play 2 or 3 more characters and see if you can do anything about it.
Yeah, this is maybe the first time we've seen this Maximus Palace Horse out of the Amber Sapphire deck. It was one of the last additions to the deck. Brennan and Harlan cut 1 copy of Robin Hood and 1 copy of You Have Forgotten Me to get in 2 copies of that horse. And this is a good spot for it here. It's making Frank's turn pretty awkward. He has a Rapunzel, but if he wants to challenge the Maximus, he would lose his Giant Fairy or have to restrict himself to just 1 card off the Rapunzel. So kind of bottlenecked on his plays thanks to this Bodyguard Maximus.
All right, here's Stitch Rockstar.
This is a good spot for Stitch Rockstar, I think. We see these big Stitch turns can be one of the weaknesses of Amber Sapphire.
Finds an aerial, which we can play next turn. I think we're a little low on resources this turn after that big shift payments. But we're going to draw 1 and then loot 1 with the Simba Future King. We'll see how Frank wants to sequence. He can maybe keep something that's inkable and then play a Be Our Guest and set up for next turn, maybe with another giant Tinkerbell. My guess, though, we're just going to ink the Be Our Guest or discard it and then quest for a bit. I don't really want to cast a whole new world, but maybe that's what he's really thinking about because, Harlan still has a couple cards in hand, but Frank's running out of resources. But
Yeah,
Rockstar can change that.
the Maximus again. Frank has two characters that can sing right now, so a lot of the time that represents a grab your sword plus a whole new world in the same turn. But even if he was able to find that card, the Maximus would stop the Lilo from maybe taking down the Hades, leaving Frank's play pretty ineffective. So Frank feeling a little bit stuck. None of his plays are going to be really outstanding, so he has to kind of choose the best from a set of mediocre options.
All right, Frank, really thinking about this discard. This is a pivotal moment in the game because whatever he discards, he's going to lose access to, and that could change how the next few turns play out. And it looks like we're going to go discarding Ariel, Spectacular Singer, keeping a Rapunzel in hand. Now, do we ink the Be Our Guest or do we ink Rapunzel and play Be Our Guest? The last card, other than that, is a whole new world. You don't really want to give your opponent access to more Hades and let it goes. And they didn't play a Hades last turn, so they probably don't have one.
Yeah.
All right, gonna ink Be Our Guest. Let's see if there's any other play. I don't think there is, but we might sing a whole new world. We could just quest for 6, 7, up to 16, thanks to the shift.
Yeah, honestly, 16 lore is a pretty good spot to be against Amber Sapphire.
Mm-hmm.
If Frank can get 4, maybe 5 or 6 lore down on the following turn, that might be too much for Harlan to interact with. But
Whoa, a big pass turn there. Frank thinks, hey, I can maybe win a longer game here by not shoving in, but
and I think here's the reason for that. I just talked about getting to 16 lore maybe being a good spot, but leaving these characters ready if you sniff out a lack of interaction on Harlan's side is just as good, and it means you're denying Harlan the opportunity to use multiple turns of challenging with his characters.
all right, Hades gets back Rapunzel, that powerful heal effect, gonna draw 3 cards, and now Harlan maybe gonna get a little aggressive and start questing so that Frank's under the gun. We have enough ink so that Bell Strange with special quest for 5, so we
Yeah,
can quest for 8 right now. We're not quite threatening lethal next turn, but we could play one more character, and then I think that does threaten lethal on the follow-up. So Harlan here looking to put some pressure on Frank since Frank chose not to quest next turn. I really liked questing last turn because it was unlikely Harlan was going to be able to clear both of the shift characters and
mm,
the Lilo. And, either that or I would have maybe liked to just go ahead and wheel and then play 1 or 2 more cards off of your leftover ink. It's obviously a weird spot, but, Frank going with the more conservative route might end up biting him if Harlan finds a 2-turn swing for victory.
exactly. And this Rapunzel out of the discard pile for Harlan did find another copy of Belle, and Harlan with this massive ink advantage uh, is able to play that Belle this turn, which is pretty threatening for Frank. Though we did see last was it earlier this round or maybe a previous round, Frank able to find multiple grab your sword in the same turn
Mm-hmm.
to take down a ready Belle.
Okay, Harlan here, figuring out what to do. Still has the ability to play 2 ink. Decides to
3
not.
ink. Ah ah ah.
Ah, ah, ah. Second strange but special. Now Harlan gonna go in 5, 6, 7, 8. Gonna leave the Simba on the other side of the table, and this is why maybe you quest if you're Frank because without the forceful challenge, Harlan able to maybe turn the corner. We have 5, 6, 7, 8 that's at the ready to quest next turn. That's gonna be very difficult to get off the table, and then now you got to punch through Maximus to get to the other bell.
We will get our lore totals updated shortly here, but
Should be 7 if I'm not or 8 for Harlan if I'm not mistaken. Our spotter seems to be snoozing.
yeah, this is a play pattern we've seen a couple times now. Amber Sapphire kind of quickly accelerating to the point where both players are threatening a win in the next turn or two.
All right, Harlan in the tank. He can play 2 ink and then play a BR guess. I think that's what he's really thinking about. But these characters that he can play can both come down next turn. But is
Yeah.
there going to be a next turn, really? Right? Or like, how far in the future is this game going to go? And Harlan says, I don't think it's going to go long enough for Maximus and the
Maleficent.
Maleficent to be as relevant as using this right now to find something like Hades for next turn. Okay, Karsten, we're going to go back his way. A lot of options at his disposal, including a whole new world and a Rapunzel. Finds another whole new world, so he might be bottlenecked into playing that this turn since he didn't quest or sing last turn.
Yeah, I would not be at all surprised to just see Rapunzel hit the ink and then a whole new world come down with so few options. I think it's possible you come to the conclusion that this turn is going to require a whole new world if you're going to do anything at all. But maybe Frank considering challenging this palace horse and dealing with the characters through brute force.
Well, he does have the Rapunzel, so maybe wants to challenge first and then Rapunzel instead of singing, and maybe looking for ways to get through that way. Because we can use Lilo and Rockstar to eat one of the bells, and that prevents lethal from next turn. And that might be exactly what he's going for. The problem is that he's not threatening lethal, and so he's basically putting himself in a reactive position. And his deck is not that well set up to be reactive,
Yeah.
especially considering the large sizing of the Amber Sapphire deck. So it's a tough spot. If you're a Frank Karsten fan, maybe you hope the last two turns would have went a little better for you. But if you're a Harlan Fear fan, you got to be pretty happy with your position right now. And Bell Strange with special is really showing off.
Yeah, it takes a lot of resources to do really any challenging this turn. Uh, it'll leave Frank probably unable to sing any songs if he wants to get any uh, any healing off this Rapunzel because the Maximus forced these challenges in the order they happened.
Yeah, Maximus quite annoying. We're gonna do the sequence I laid out a moment ago, and then we're gonna heal two and draw two. The follow up here, maybe some characters to trigger Stitch Rockstar. Here's another Lilo making a wish.
Yeah, this is a difficult decision. Does decide to draw a card because Harlan being ahead on board at this point means exerted Lilos are threatened almost for free.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why one of the initial ways we built the Amber Steel Stitch Rockstar deck was with characters like Minnie Mouse from Amber, the 2-drop 2/3 that's just generic.
Yeah.
Things like Cornered Swordsman, right? If your opponent's going to challenge you, you want them to be challenging and hurting. That way your
Yes.
cards are actually trading, 2 for 1 against, but, they're basically replacing themselves pretty freely. Carefree Server is the pickup off of Be Our Guest. Going to quest for 2 up to 11, and now we're going to go back Harlan's way. I think he's firmly in control, and we'll see if he's able to close out this game. Maybe not this turn, but maybe next turn.
Yeah, Harlan with 10 lore in play, and Frank only with 2, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah,
Nope.
could just completely ignore and go quest, but likely going to eat both of the Lilos, and if he has some sort of removal spell in hand, like Let It Go or another Hades, he could take out the Stitch Rockstar, but let's see what he goes for.
Yeah, looks like
Detective Mickey. Okay. More ink. Maleficent uninvited. And then
so we've talked about Be Our Guest sequencing. The last two cards in hand here for Harlan are Let It Go and Be Our Guest. Looks like he's been considering just using all his ink rather than singing the Let It Go, and then decided that the Be Our Guest wasn't going to be played this turn. But now maybe having a change of heart, counting things out once again.
no, he's just setting up attacks versus non-attacks, and he's 100% playing to Let It Go. I guarantee it.
Mm-hmm.
The Bell Stranger special does offer a potential quest for 5, and Harlan considering using the Hades as a challenge instead of the Rapunzel. Ooh, we're gonna hit the Rapunzel. Oh, are we just getting rid of everything? Okay, so Harlan is going full control mode, and we're gonna smush all characters from Frank's side of the table. And Harlan Fear is gonna be on the precipice of winning and being your first finalist here for the Lost Boys Lorcana Invitational. He's got 3, 4, 5, 6, plus 5 is 11, 12, 13 lore potential in play. Frank Karsten has to kill something. I don't know that he can. And Harlan is on the precipice.
Yeah, the virtue of this play here, Harlan got to add 4 more lore to the board, making him a threat to lethal, and the fact that he got rid of all the singers on Frank's side means Frank's ink is going to be really tied up if he wants to make any kind of swingy plays, such as a grab your sword.
Yeah. I think Frank's going to go back and look at the replay of this and realize that the turn where he passed without questing or singing was likely the turning point. It allowed Harlan essentially a free turn of singing, of questing, and put him in just a really bad spot. And here he's just trying to dig out of a hole, and his deck doesn't dig out of holes like this very well. We did find an answer to the bell, and so that's going to prevent a bit of lore generation, but it's just going to
Frank
be
hasn't developed
a
anything.
band-aid on a fire hydrant. It's just spewing,
Yeah.
and it's just not going to work out that well for him. He can play another character here, I think. Maybe not. Just a lantern. Okay, so gonna go back Harlan's way. Your go. Your go. Are we in good shape? I think so.
Yeah. 8 lore this turn. Just drew a fresh 7.
Yeah.
Harlan's just going to be able to add on to this.
Frank here, a great sport, but gonna let Harlan close it out. We're gonna draw 2 cards. Basically no outs from Frank's side of things. His deck is not set up to beat characters of this high of willpower and this much lore generation
Not the bell.
from not the bell from this spot. So looks like we're gonna see Harlan in the finals here. We're gonna go questing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, up to 16. We're gonna go back to Karsten's way. Needs quadruple grab your sword, and he's only got about 10 inks. So
yeah.
good luck. Impressive stuff from the Ember Sapphire deck.
There's 2 grab your sword.
There's 2 of them.
But
how big is Carefree Surfer?
Yeah. The Carefree Surfer plus the Maleficent Uninvited are enough to win the game for Harlan.
Bring out the dice. There it is. Frank Karsten packs it in, and Harlan Fear is your winner. He is moving on to the finals, and he's going to be the first of our 2 finalists here. The Lost Boys Lorcana Invitational. Congratulations to Harlan Fear, fellow Lost Boy. I never had a doubt.
No?
I had a few. Never had a doubt is what I'm going to say publicly. I mean, wait. We're on
Oh, no.
Oh, no. So Harlan, with that Ember Sapphire deck, that unique take that Team NDA brought to this event, ramping and beating what I would consider a somewhat bad matchup. I think that they are relatively weak against the aggressive starts featuring Simba Protective Cub. Was able to overcome it 2 out of the 3 games and goes on to the finals. That deck looking quite impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really interesting matchup. There were some routes that both players could have considered. The games could have turned out different ways, but lots of exciting cards flying back and forth, and the higher willpower wins the day for the Ember Sapphire list.
All right.